to look at life like that sensitivity of the way, particularly in Preet Veena, and he writes about it's about a relationship. And he writes a lot about a relationship and what, Nikki, you had mentioned also about love. And then I want to go back actually to Nikki, what you began with, that you read from the book, What is Life? Jeevan Ki Hai. Because so I was thinking all of us at this point in time, at some point in time in our lives, ask that question, what is life? And
especially, with the pandemic, yes. It's going on. We have time. We don't go out. What means the most to me? Who am I? What am I? I mean, this is kind of a perennial question. Plato asked it. The Upanishads ask it. Here is. But what amazes me about Bhai Vir Singh is that it's a woman. Yes. She leaves the house. She questions. So it's. I have a whole chapter on that. Just analyzing the poem as Sikh existentialism. How Sikh existentialism is illustrated in this poem. And it's really a very, very, very significant, very, very philosophical poem, because she goes, who am I? She's feeling, she does this anxiety that we have. I mean, you read Heidegger and so forth, we are humans. We are not gods and we are not stones. So to be human is to have that anxiety. It is if we didn't, we would not be humans. And so, what is this anxiety? How do we overcome it? And he brings, just as Surinder Veer has been saying, the Guru's word. It's this kind of this duality when we don't see ourselves one with the other. And that's why it's in that opening, the one where I read, the stars are up there, the moon is up there, and the lake is down there. These are not two divided worlds. These are they reach for each other. This reaching out to one another, that's very important. And I think that's that whole notion of home, ego, I am who I am, and you are somebody else. So he really brings, it's really Guru Nanak's philosophy that the ego is at the heart of this anxiety. And once we get rid of it, and he shows it through the woman, she goes to the lake, she leaves her house. I mean, that's very important to think about it. When do women have that freedom to leave their chores and leave their families and so forth and think about themselves? We are so busy. Just think about ourselves even today. We live in a very mechanical time. I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. Where is the luxury? Who am I? What am I? What is life all about? And then she goes to the lake and she sees the lake is all calm and beautiful, but she isn't. So she sees herself as really different and a total contrast. And he presents her gestures. She's looking up and down. Her eyes are going like this, He really portrays how her mental anxiety is reflected in her body, in her facial expression. She's pale, right? Ande vargi, zardi, like she's yellow, like of that egg, He really, the analogies that he uses are quite phenomenal. And so you see her going through all that pain and angst. But she comes to this lake every time. She sees a little bit, and then ultimately she sees the blossoms. So it's kind of, she sees what she's really experiencing is this kind of growth. There's nothing on the lake, and then there are little buds, then they grow up, and then there is this keda. And that's when she sees the blossoms, she kind of realizes she is one with the blossoms. Keda, hoi appe. The blossom. She becomes a blossom herself. So she learns from nature. So nature becomes kind of the intellectual source, her metaphysical kind of awakening. And I think the last words in the poem are that, if I may, what is it? Sutta kheda uda jagaya, khede rog jamaya. So whatever is, so we all have the joy in us. And that's what Guru Nanak says too. To me, this is Sikh scripture. The joy is here, the ecstasy is here, but something has closed it off. And that's our individuality. It's our selfishness. I want this. And we do all that. I want money. I want this. So it's running after these egoistical pursuits that we really miss what is deep inside. And I think he's showing that. He's kind of through his poem after poem, exegesis after exegesis. It's really the basic, we are joy. It's the joy is here. How do we open up? How do we become that blossom? Keda, keda, you know? And it's and that poem, really, people should read it. I reread it, and I want to thank Inni. I literally, sorry to admit, but I had not read it in 30 years. And I reread it last night, and I felt like the little young, youthful person I was once upon a time. He does that even at our age and so forth. It's the same emotions that he brings out. So, I mean, I could go on with this poem, but anyway. So,
how does he do that? How does he do that? That all of a sudden, you know, in Preet Veena, when I'm reading it, I'm actually that woman sitting in that lake, and I'm feeling those pangs, like I'm there. It's through his writing, like you say, you became youthful, you became that. How does a poet do that? How does he enable one to feel right there that this is happening to them? And it's not the other. It's like me. I'm sitting on that lake. What is that I'm sure there is a literary word, Nikki, or there is something there to be able to transport a reader to that level?
That's a really, really good question. And that, I mean, if I were to think of a philosopher, it's Tolstoy, who said the artist is infected. You know, it's like giving a disease. You become contagious and you pass it on to the other, to the reader. So he has something within him, which he's passing it on. And the more, so I would say with Bhai Vir Singh, you know, because I've been kind of thinking about him all these years, one is his poetic genius. You know, he just has it, the language that he uses. Simple language, chatti, you know, like Mari, you know, the moon kind of has a little peek at the lake. It's a simplicity of the words. This is not using, he's not doing, Surinder said it very beautifully earlier, you know, he's not, they didn't care about anything. It came from within him. And that's what he's writing. And so I think it is his sensitivity to language, to his vastness, as we said. You know, he's read so much, so he has images left and right at his fingertips. And 3, it's his philosophy. Because what you see ultimately, this woman's journey is what psychologists say, what Upanishads say, you know, how she goes from this world of dualisms and dualities and so forth. There's a transition. He really paves through her 5 journeys to the lake. She evolves, she progresses. So it's a very structured. So it looks, you know, so it's a very crafted work of art. So she starts out there full of questions. Then she kind of starts going into that semi-conscious world. You know how the ego starts to break, and she's like, oh, there are 2 moons. There's a moon up there and the moon down here and so forth. So that rational, logical world begins to crack open, and then she falls asleep. Remember when she goes and falls under it's a sunny day, bright, and she kind of goes into her unconscious world. And then after that unconscious world, she sees that totality with the world. And this is really the world of consciousness, semi-consciousness, unconsciousness, to a full consciousness, a totality, that bliss, whatever we want to say. So there's also that kind of world that you hear from the Upanishads. But then there's also that world coming from the Islamic world. Zahir, Batan come together. You know, what is external? This is all Sufi approach to life and living. You know, so what is there? Are esoteric teachings, there's something there, and exoteric. And with her, at that moment, the deep inside and the outside become one. So I think, you know, your question is absolutely brilliant. You know, what happens here? It's really hard to say, because it's happening at so many different levels. It's just so, it's artistic, it's psychological, it's philosophical.
Yeah.
It's poetry, language. It's that's a miracle, man. If there is magic, art, and these artists, these poets reach that. And that's what I find with the Guru Granth Sahib too. My first book was when I was an undergraduate at Wellesley College. That was my senior thesis, Physics and Metaphysics of the Guru Granth Sahib. And that thesis, that topic still resonates in my mind after all these years. Whatever I do, it's the same thing. How is this sophisticated, complex philosophy, doctrines rendered so beautifully, so artistically? That was, by physics, I meant the art, the analogies, the alliteration, assonance, consonants. And by metaphysics, I meant the philosophy, what is beyond, the transcendent, the divine, the all-pervasive reality. How is that expressed through this poetry? And I remember my teacher, you know, she was a Christian scholar. There was nobody to teach me Sikhism at that point. And she would say, Nikki, physics means the pages and the book and so forth. It will not go as a title. And I said, no, Professor Mowry, I want it. I want physics and metaphysics. And I think that physical, that elemental, that body, and the deeply spiritual, the transcendent coming together. That's what the gurus gave us, and Bhai Vir Singh, keeping on their legacy, does that and brings us, as you say, closer and takes us farther and farther, vaster and vaster dimensions.